Chris Wallace with WG Financial Group has been helping families here in the Huntsville area plan for a successful retirement. Chris strives to understand all of your financial needs to help guide you on the path to your retirement goals, creating income in retirement, maximizing your savings, and minimizing taxes. Chris has the strategies you need to help you sustain a successful retirement. Welcome to the Rocket City Retirement Show with Chris Wallace.
Many people have accumulated the majority of their retirement savings in IRAs, 401ks, and other plans that are being directly impacted by changes coming from Congress and the state legislature. This includes changes in tax policy as well. Did you know your taxes will be going up according to current federal law on January 1st, 2026? Welcome to the Rocket City Retirement Show with Chris Wallace. I'm Luann Fulmer here with Chris, a certified financial planner, and he's owner of WG Financial Group. Chris, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Luann. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well. Thank you. So I wanted to start with some examples of how legislative changes can impact our planning. And, you know, everybody can remember there used to be a stretch IRA. Okay. That's been eliminated thanks to policy changes in Washington. And how could that impact possible plans to leave an IRA to our loved ones?
Yeah, so let's first address what's happening at the end of 2025, because you kind of mentioned that in the opening there. So essentially, the TCJA tax cuts and job tax is going to expire at the end of 2025. And when that happens, there are brackets that are going to go up and they're going to revert back to where they used to be. Now, for the vast majority of the middle class, that's actually going to be a tax increase. Now, I hear a lot of stuff about tax the wealthy, tax the rich. There's not a lot of people in those higher tax brackets. The ones that are hurt the most are going to be the middle class. I actually have a spreadsheet that I use to kind of analyze this. Believe it or not, spreadsheet here in Huntsville, a lot of engineers, so make fun of me.
Yeah.
So I have a spreadsheet that I've taken a look at, and it's really going to be most impactful for the people that fall right in kind of the middle area of those tax brackets, which is where most Americans simply reside when it comes to income. So we're going to see that go back. And so I want to address the stretch IRA, which is what you had just asked about. So in Secure Act 1.0, that was actually done away with. And so what a stretch IRA is just an inherited IRA where when you as a non-spouse inherited an IRA, you could stretch it out over your life expectancy. So those required minimum distributions that you have to take nowadays when you reach 73 and 75, you could take those, but you could stretch them out over your life expectancy. That's why it's called a stretch IRA.
Right.
Nowadays, under Secure Act 1.0, now you have 10 years to pay all of the taxes on the IRA. So the IRS essentially gets their money a little bit quicker. We all know that we have a silent partner in the IRS. We own our IRAs. Believe me, we do. They're in our names. But when we start taking money out, the IRS wants a piece of that, and they will. The larger amounts you pull out, the larger piece of the pie they end up getting in a lot of cases.
Yeah. So what are some ways then that we can ensure that our beneficiaries are not going to get hit with that large tax burden when they inherit an IRA?
Yeah, so this is it's a little bit tricky because somebody's going to ultimately pay the tax, whether that be you or whether that be the beneficiaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a family decision.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of families that are on one side of the fence, and I think there are a lot on the other side of the fence. So this side of the fence is the parents want to pay all the taxes and convert all of the money so that their kids don't have to pay the taxes. And some parents are like in the mindset of, hey, I paid for your college, I bought your first car, I've helped you with a house, you can pay the taxes on my IRA,
Yeah.
I'm not paying it.
Right.
So it depends on what camp you're in as to how well and what type of planning you actually need to do. But prior to passing away, you could look at Roth conversions as a way. If you're sitting on a lot of pre-tax money and you're really concerned about the kids paying taxes, you can start converting to Roth IRAs. But let me remind you that even though if you convert to Roth IRAs, you still only have 10 years to let the Roth IRA sit in a Roth IRA, and then it has to be taken out of Roth status. So let me tie that back to what we just said earlier about the stretch IRA. Nowadays, you have 10 years to pay the taxes. I just kind of went over that. It's the same rule for Roth IRAs. In other words, when you convert to a Roth IRA, it doesn't mean you get to leave it in Roth. Your kids get to leave it in Roth forever. They have 10 years to leave it in Roth, and then they have to take the money out. So there is some benefit there, but just keep that in mind because I've had people come to me and say, hey, Chris, I want to convert all this so my kids don't have to, and then they've got tax-free money for the rest of their life. That's not the case. They have tax-free money for 10 years, and then they have to take it out of Roth status.
Oh my gosh. Okay, see, that was so good. That's such good clarification there. I did not know that. I would have thought the same thing that
A
your
lot of
clients are
people are
saying.
misinformed
Yeah.
about that.
Very, very good. All right, let me give you an example. Let's say I have lost my spouse, but I have 3 children, and I want to know, what should I be doing before I actually pass away? What would be something I could do?
Well, the first thing you mentioned, I'm just kind of listening to what you said. I've just lost a spouse.
Right.
The first thing you want to do is update your beneficiaries.
Okay.
And make sure those 3 children are pulled up into the primary spot.
Right.
Then after passing, you can actually set up 3 different inherited IRAs. So let's say you pass away and your IRA is going to go to the 3 of them. They will each have individually their own separate IRA as long as they are their own beneficiary. So you have 3 beneficiaries on there. But let me take this a step further because I've run into this a lot of times.
Oh.
Let's say, for example, still using you've got 3 kids, but you don't. Let's say 2 of them are not great with money. Let's just say it that way.
Right.
And you want all the money to go to Susie because she's the oldest and she's better with money, and you want Susie to pass out money to the other 2.
Okay.
Now, understand with an IRA that if you have Susie inheriting all of that money, number one, no matter what, it's Susie's money. So Susie does not have to distribute any of it to the other 2. Now, we know Susie will because that's her siblings, right? We know that. The second thing, and probably the most important thing, is you've just handed all of that tax liability to Susie. So I've seen this before where families have one child that's a little bit better with money. And so they'll have that money go to that child, but then they assume all the tax liability at that point. So you got to be really careful how you set the beneficiaries up. Now, I'll take this a little bit step further. I've had people not care as much about their beneficiaries. In other words, they say, well, the will take care of it. No. By law, a named beneficiary will trump the will. So if you're watching the show, it is very important to make sure that on all of your bank accounts, your IRAs, your investment accounts that you have beneficiaries on file that you want the assets to go to, because whoever's name is on file as a beneficiary, that's who's getting the asset.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that, Chris. Up next, we'll cover the best ways to prepare for these risks that we're talking about in retirement. And later, Chris has some answers to your retirement questions.
You have a club for every scenario. A driver for the long holes. Wedges to get you over the hazards. And a putter for when you need a touch of finesse. What about your retirement? Will you have enough to play the back nine? Call to set your 15-minute phone visit today and let's find out. Get a second set of eyes on your retirement plan.
There are some things you can't avoid, but you can avoid overpaying taxes in retirement. You may think your taxes will go down in retirement, but that's not always true. In fact, sometimes your tax liability could go up. We're offering a free guide to show how you may be able to pay fewer taxes in retirement. Learn how different retirement accounts are taxed and options to help make your retirement income more tax efficient, all in easy-to-understand terms. Download this free tax guide now to help keep what's yours and avoid overpaying taxes in retirement. Congratulations, you did it! You worked hard and saved for retirement, but now you have questions. Could my taxes increase? How will I cover my expenses? Will my income last? You need a strategy to help make sure your hard-earned money goes the distance in retirement. That's why we're offering this free guide designed to help you determine if your nest egg can withstand the challenges of a 21st century retirement. Longer lives, increasing healthcare costs, and taxes are just a few of the possible risks to your income. Get the guide today and take the first step to help your money last in retirement.
For our generation, we've always known that a hard day's work is its own reward. It's something our parents taught us long ago, and it's something we hope continues for our family. Honest work has always been a part of our lives. So for some of us, it's hard to turn off that work switch in retirement. But imagine what can happen when that work switch becomes a life switch. Look at the day that's ahead of you now. 8 hours of your energy, wherever you want to go, whatever you want to do, with whomever you want to be with, and at whatever pace you like. And then you realize a nice day in retirement is its own reward. At WG Financial Group, Chris and the team can help turn a work switch into a life switch. They can develop retirement strategies to help work days become life days and create a plan for the retirement years ahead.
You're watching the Rocket City Retirement Show with Chris Wallace.
Thanks for joining us today. Chris, how can viewers prepare for legislative risk?
Being aware is one way to at least start the preparation. So let's take, for example, what they've done to required minimum distributions. Prior to Secure Act 1.0, you had RMDs that were due at 70.5. Now, honestly, I always found that a little bit confusing. I'm like, why didn't they just make it like 71, where it's really simple? But it was like 70.5, and I just never really completely understood that. Well, thankfully, Secure Act 1.0 came along, and it pushed the required minimum distribution age out to 72. Well, then not too long after that, they passed Secure Act 2.0, and it pushed RMDs out to 73. And if you were born in 1960 or later, your RMD is not due until 75. So all of that's really important from a Roth conversion standpoint. So, if you retire, let's say at age 60, 62, and you were born in 1960, you've got 15 or so years to start some tax planning before you have to start taking money. Because what will happen is a lot of times when you retire, you've got all this pre-tax money. 15 years is a long time for that money to sit there and grow in the markets, and it may double, maybe even triple by the time the 15 years rolls around. And what that's going to do is that's going to really exacerbate the amount of money that's got to come out of that account, which is going to push you up probably in a tax bracket and impact, multiple things from a tax perspective. So I think during your working years is when the planning really starts. But it's not even too late that if you're almost at retirement or even in retirement to start thinking about tax planning. On previous shows, we've talked about Roth conversions. We're talking about it now. We've talked about several charitable giving ways that are efficient for retirees. We meet with a lot of families that like to give to charities, 501c3s and or churches, and there are very efficient ways to do that. So I think rather than just assume that you're going to pay taxes, I think it's worth sitting down with a financial professional, maybe even a CPA, and trying to best understand, how can I maximize my tax situation? I'll give you another example too that I run into a lot that, can help you plan for taxes in retirement. Here in the state of Alabama, you don't pay taxes or state tax on defined benefit plan pensions. So like if you're a federal government employee, military employer, you have a pension that comes from a defined benefit plan with a company, there's no state tax due on it. So sometimes you get offered the lump sum. Well, if you take that lump sum, you may have to pay some state taxes on it. But if it's coming out of the pension plan in the form of a payment, there is no state taxes on it. But Alabama has just recently passed a law that is going to allow you to pull per person, when the law finally goes all the way into effect, $24,000 per person. So if you're married, you'll get a $48,000 that you could pull out of an IRA and not have to pay state taxes on it. So it's not like you're like in the state of Florida or Tennessee or Texas where there is no state tax. What they do is they're going to give the retiree some leeway. So I thought that was a really good thing that the state of Alabama just passed. Currently this year, it sits at $12,000. So if you were 65 or older and you take a distribution from a retirement plan like an IRA, you have a $12,000 exemption from state tax until you go over that threshold. So there's a lot of little laws that I think are hard to keep up with. I think that's part of my job as part of a CPA's job to make sure that the families that we work with are really making the most tax efficient decisions possible.
Oh my gosh, that's an example right there why we need somebody like you to guide us.
Yeah, most people don't know about that new Alabama law that passed. It's new, it's out there, but it's helpful to know because that made help you make a decision on what to do with some of your funds.
Sure. So, you mentioned the change in ages for the RMDs, the required minimum distributions. Is that change going to impact our retirement income strategy or for those people?
Well, it could, again, because I think you can do things with your tax planning because you have more time to do it at this point. Now, I don't know why Congress did that. I don't know if they did it to entice Roth conversions. Because if you think about it, if you Roth convert today, then the money that you're converting, you pay taxes on it today. So that gives the government more tax money today. So I'm almost wondering if some of this was done to encourage Roth converting so that the government has more tax money today, because I don't know if you've seen our debt lately, but it's kind of high, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to pay for that, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
I don't know, just my thoughts.
Chris, why don't you talk about how we can plan for the tax impacts of withdrawing money from our retirement accounts?
Yeah, so let's go back to you're going to pay taxes on some of it. And let's go back to when you're working, and I said it's always good to establish taxable buckets. So we know you have your pre-tax bucket where you've never paid taxes on it. You maybe have your tax-free bucket where it's Roth money, so you pay taxes as it goes in, but not in the future. And then you have a bucket that falls under what's called capital gains taxes. So in your pre-working years, in a perfect world, it would be nice to set up those multiple buckets, because then that would set you up for success in retirement, because then once you got to retirement, you have multiple places to pull money out of to put on your tax return and take income. And that's usually going to lend you a much more favorable tax position. So understanding this type of thing and doing some of that tax planning in the future, or I'm sorry, while you're working before you get to retirement, will help you in the future, if you're doing that while you're still working. But if you're already there, now you've got to work with what you have. And we have a lot of clients that have nothing but pre-taxed. And in some cases, there's not a lot you can do. There are, again, some giving strategies. There are conversion strategies where we do convert to Roth, and then we intertwine some charitable giving in with that to offset some of the taxation for our families that like to give. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is, if you are watching this show, I don't want you to give up and say, I'm in retirement. Well, what do I do now? I can't do anything. I'm just going to sit on it the way that it is. Sometimes, again, we've said it before on the show, you don't know what you don't know. Come in, sit down with us, let us talk to you, let us take a really good look at your situation and see if we could not, come up with something to help you out, either now, maybe before required minimum distributions, or maybe if money's passed on to your kids.
So legislative risk is something we can't control, right? But we can control things about our own situation, and that's how you help your retirees.
That's correct. So we can't control the legislative risk. I mean, we can by getting our rear ends in the voting booth, right? We can do that. So that's one thing I hope everybody does. But once it is what it is, then you have to work within the parameters that you're provided. And I think that's where we do a really good job at looking at someone's retirement and saying, hey, did you know you could do this? Like I mentioned on previous shows about an HSA. If you're looking to lower your tax burden, why not use an HSA as part of that tax strategy? It makes perfect sense to me. If you're in a low income bracket, use the Roth. At that point, you're in a low bracket. Why would you not do Roth? And if you're kind of in that middle ground where you're maybe in your 40s or 45, 50 years old, you're starting to make a little bit more money, maybe it's a mixture. Maybe it's a mixture of pre-tax and maybe a mixture of Roth. At the end of the day, you have to always be thinking about taxes. And let's be real and real clear here. When we're looking off in the future, it's kind of crystal balling to a certain degree. We don't know exactly where tax rates are going. But again, if you look at our debt, I can probably say they're going up.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this moment here. But coming up, we are going to have some of your retirement questions that Chris is going to answer next in our Q&A segment. So stay with us.
You have a club for every scenario. A driver for the long holes. Wedges to get you over the hazards. And a putter for when you need a touch of finesse. What about your retirement? Will you have enough to play the back nine? Call to set your 15-minute phone visit today and let's find out. Get a second set of eyes on your retirement plan.
There are some things you can't avoid, but you can avoid overpaying taxes in retirement. You may think your taxes will go down in retirement, but that's not always true. In fact, sometimes your tax liability could go up. We're offering a free guide to show how you may be able to pay fewer taxes in retirement. Learn how different retirement accounts are taxed and options to help make your retirement income more tax efficient, all in easy to understand terms. Download this free tax guide now to help keep what's yours and avoid overpaying taxes in retirement. Congratulations, you did it! You worked hard and saved for retirement, but now you have questions. Could my taxes increase? How will I cover my expenses? Will my income last? You need a strategy to help make sure your hard-earned money goes the distance in retirement. That's why we're offering this free guide designed to help you determine if your nest egg can withstand the challenges of a 21st century retirement. Longer lives, increasing healthcare costs, and taxes are just a few of the possible risks to your income. Get the guide today and take the first step to help your money last in retirement.
You're watching the Rocket City Retirement Show with Chris Wallace.
It's time now to get to some of the questions you have for Chris today. So let's get started. You ready? All right. Your very first question is from Ryan in Tony. And he says, I am 61 years old and I'm getting ready to retire. I've been working hard and putting money away my entire career. I feel like I've saved more than enough for retirement, but the stock market is making me nervous. In the last year, there were a couple of months that I lost a lot in my 401k. It scared me. What do you think I need to do?
Okay, so the first thing I think he needs to do, Ryan, is understand that the closer you get to retirement, the way that you feel about the stock market is going to change. So think about 30 years ago, this didn't matter. It didn't matter at all. Now you're thinking about, okay, I'm within, he didn't say how long, I don't think, as far as how
Nope,
far
he
out
just
he
said he
was.
was getting ready to
Getting
retire.
close, right?
Yeah.
So he's inside the 10-yard line if we're on a football field.
Yeah.
And he's getting nervous because the market's dropping. He's watching his portfolio balance drop. And now he's worried that if he goes into retirement, what's that going to do to his probability of making it all the way through retirement? So what does he need to do? The first thing I would recommend is sitting down with a financial professional. Make sure that you kind of lay out all your goals, all of your objectives, and you want to make sure that your financial plan can support all of those. And then what I would do from there is take a look at your asset allocation, your diversification, and make sure that it lines up with your financial plan. We use the financial plan in the office to really guide us on how someone should be invested. Like, for example, Ryan may come in and say, I want to be all stock, but his plan won't support that. So that's why I say it's critical to work with someone who has the tools and the available resources like we do to be able to help you build out and construct a plan to get you all the way through retirement.
Okay, very good. The next question is from Lewis in Athens. And he says, I'm 65 and I'm trying to figure out if I've saved enough to retire soon. I've been doing a lot of research, but it's hard to know exactly how long my money will last. My parents lived long lives, so I assume I will too. Is it true that the magic number today is $5 million to have saved?
I can say if it's $5 million, there's a lot of people that won't ever retire.
I know.
They won't hit that number. So I think a lot, yeah, exactly. I think a lot of it has to do more about with, how much you're spending in retirement. So what does that lifestyle look like relative to how much you should have saved? So one of the things that struck me that you were reading off his question was he's been doing a lot of research. And research can be confusing because as you get on Google and you try to Google yourself through retirement, essentially, you can run into different opinions. And just understand, a lot of stuff on the internet, it's just a wide variety of opinions. And then all of a sudden you gravitate one way or the other because that's probably the way your bias leans. I tend to lean towards math. Like, what does the math tell us? Because at the end of the day, if the numbers are input correctly, the mathematical calculations and the answers that come out of those equations will be correct if we put the data in correctly. So I'm a fan of building a plan that can run Monte Carlo simulations. And essentially what a Monte Carlo simulation is, it's just a probability analysis, essentially. It's going to, our software runs 1,000 different trials. So it basically takes you and retires you 1,000 different times and gives us a wide range of outcomes. Because if I sat here and I tell you and I say, hey, if you just make 4% in retirement, you're good. Well, what if you don't? What if you make 3.7% on average? Or what if you make 5.7? How good does it look? Or how bad does it look? That's what the Monte Carlo does. It takes into account some of those broad, range of outcomes that can happen. So that's what I think someone should do is actually sit down and have a plan designed, built out by math, not necessarily in Excel. You can do a lot of things in Excel, but I've seen a lot of mistakes with some of the plans that I've reviewed of some of the engineers that have come in the office. They'll bring their spreadsheets and there's things that are just wrong with the spreadsheet. So I'm a big fan of just sitting down with a planner and making sure.
Yeah, I love that. Next question is from Gary in Huntsville. He says, I've had life insurance ever since I got married. That's been more than 40 years. I'm getting close to retirement. The policy has built up quite a bit of cash value over all of these years. Do you think I still need life insurance or should I cash out? And will I owe taxes if I take the cash?
Really, really good question. So let me touch on several things here. Gary says that he's had life insurance since he was
married
young
40 years ago.
Yeah, great. So if you're young and watching the show, make sure you have plenty of term life insurance for sure. It sounds like to me that Gary bought a whole life policy maybe when he was younger. It's accumulated and built up a whole lot of cash value. So his first question was, will I have taxes if I take that money out? The
Right.
answer is no, not unless the amount of cash is built up in a situation that may cause a taxable event. I would recommend before you pull the cash out that you talk to the insurance company to make sure that if you take a withdrawal of that cash value, will there be any taxable event? The insurance company will be able to tell you that because they'll have the records of all of your premiums paid, how much the policy has accumulated. I think what he maybe should take a look at doing, there are certain situations where policies have a lot of cash value built up. And please understand this too, Gary. In most policies, if you die, you get the death benefit, not the death benefit and the cash value. Now, there are a few policies that allow that, but they're very, very far and few between. It's basically the death benefit and not the cash. What I would look at is since you've already been paying on it, and if you've had it for that many years, it's probably pretty cheap. So it's probably worth just hanging on to because you've already paid all the money into it, and the premium nowadays is pretty cheap. What I might look at doing is taking that internal cash value and looking at a 1035 exchange, maybe into a new policy that might provide you even more death benefit if one of your goals is legacy there. So there's a couple different ways you could go there. He can come into the office and we can kind of go over some options to help him out.
Yeah, Gary, give him a call. Next question comes from Jessica in Ardmore. My mother is getting older, and the doctor recommended I think about finding her an assisted living facility. She has a good size estate, but no long-term care insurance. Is there anything I can do to help make sure that she is protected?
Yeah, it sounds by the way this question was worded that she's already there at the, maybe from a health perspective of going into assisted living.
Right.
So from a long-term care insurance perspective, she probably won't qualify. I'm going to make the assumption, because this wasn't given either, that she's older. I'm going to say probably close to 80. Probably not a good idea for long-term care insurance just because of the sheer cost.
Yeah.
What I would recommend, though, is, talking to an estate planning attorney to make sure that you've got all things lined up the way that they need to be, and that estate planning attorney that's familiar with getting you through that process can probably make sure things are in order for your family.
All right. Thank you, Chris, for answering all those questions. If you want to know ways to generate lifetime income, reduce your tax bill, and maintain your lifestyle in retirement, reach out now to start planning your ideal retirement. For Chris Wallace of WG Financial Group, I'm Lou Ann Fulmer. We hope you have a great day and an even better retirement.